Hi, it's Ileana at Awakening Cosmic Reality Show, and today I have Daniel Sala with me, and we're going to discuss several different topics, reptilians, histories, and other things. Welcome, Daniel.
Hey, yeah, I'm glad you invited me again. Yeah, we kind of settled on this topic in unison because it's all the roads have been leading up to it. It's a mishmash of like all the crimes, atrocities against humanity, and also the way that we've been held hostage. You know, sort of the dark side that people don't really want to touch that much, but it is just as important as long as you don't dwell too much on it. Just knowing what you're up against, because you have to know thy enemy, and you can't possibly believe that all ETs have your best interests in mind. I mean, you have to get out of that. A very prominent whistleblower is, pushing. I don't want to name names, but the fact is that we're all targets, and you can't actually game the system. It might seem that way, but once you get caught in it, you're not going to be able to just outsmart it. It's much bigger than all of us. You can't get out of it, but it will still continue to haunt you. I mean, to test you all through your lifetime. So, yeah, and I want to give this analogy that you can't possibly blame the people who are exposing the dark stuff, because it would be the same as casting blame on the firefighters and the people who fight crime in general. And you don't want to fall in the pitfall of positivity either. So yeah, I think we should get into the types of enemies that we actually face up against, and also touch on later how even this great awakening that we're in the middle of is actually not as straightforward, is more deceptive than you would think. So I went with a sort of compilation of sources, the most trusted in this field that I have, starting with my personal favorite contactee. In terms of ET text, Alex Collier, in my opinion, is, in terms of representatives of ETs, he's the most bona fide for me. And he starts out by relaying the fact that, in terms of shedding light on why the situation on Earth is the way that it is, that this universe was created from the beginning to have the highest form of love and technology and the most advancement and the most happiness of all the experimental universes, but that we also agreed to experiment the other polarity, which is fear, which obviously comes with war and hate and self-punishment on an equal scale. So now we'll jump to the one of the biggest, let's say, foes, which are the Draconians. They are actually the oldest reptilian species in the whole galaxy. They were dumped here from another universe, and they are obviously service to self. They like to control and subjugate species. They have been around they have had space flight for 4 billion years, and they don't just conquer, they do it also through a lot of technology and genetic tinkering. They make subject races through altering species genetics. And the Patal, which represents our progenitors, they seeded the first primates, and then the later 22 genetic packets came and formed what we know as humans. And the only way we even know about the Patal is from the other humanoids, advanced humanoids like the Pleiadians and Andromedans, who saw it in the Draconian records, although they're very secretive. And they saw that they actually have them in their legends, that they were supposed to be their main challengers at some point in the future. They were the ones that made life forms in such a way that would have free expression, which is in contrast to the Draconians, which basically only create races for their own benefit and pleasure as an end goal, just as a resource. And just as an example of how old this war is between the humans and the reptilians, because of the ages of the planets in the Lyra system, it was considered the most suitable place for humans' inception by the Patal, which after about 40 million years of flourishing, they were very agriculturally savvy, they were very peaceful, and they suddenly see a fleet of Draconians in the sky, and after a misunderstanding, the fact that the Draconians asked for help, but the Lyrans didn't reciprocate on the spot, but asked for some more information. The Draconians took this, as an insult and simply attacked them and destroyed 3 out of 14 planets. And that was the beginning point of the Draconians seeing humans as a source of food. So, and the remnants of the Lyrans, because they no longer are human, are the Pleiadians and the Arcturians predominantly. So, yeah, this whole 22 genetic packs that we have in us also means that we each have a sort of affinity towards one of these soul groups, which also has been used against us, namely to spy using technology on our past lives by the Draconians. But also it goes both ways, because we have also been sent as sort of spies ourselves, through which our soul groups can see. And I don't know if you can speak about the way in which this spying on other races happens. For example, I believe the SSBs that took you looked back into your past life and saw that you belong to Pleiadians and Arcturians.
Not Arcturians, Pleiadians, Andromedans, and the L race.
Yeah.
I have learned healing modalities from contacts with Arcturians, but I'm not of a soul group with Arcturians. I have an affinity for the blue healing energy that they teach. But when I was in planetary corporations on Mars basis, and I've told this experience quite a bit, they have memory engram stations where they put you on a table, they put kind of like a visor over your head, and holographic screen activates, and they have holographic computer technology nearby the table, and they can go back in time to your previous lifetimes as whatever information they want to data mine. And they were looking for information on crystal technology. What I had done as a Pleiadian Andromedan hybrid, building crystal spaceships, with crystalline engine technology, powering those spaceships that can go beyond the speed of light. So this is what they wanted to extract from my memories as that Andromedan Pleiadian hybrid. And this is mainly why they took me into planetary corporations. I'd also been on lunar space operations, where I was taught the various types of ETs that are out there in space and what you could expect when you go out to work in space for these programs. Lunar space operations, planetary corporations, they are the US secret space programs, literally, because Wernher von Braun had built, this goes back to Project Paperclip, because German scientists after World War II were transferred to the US in the 1940s, 50s, and it was called Project Paperclip. And so Wernher von Braun, he had built V5 rockets that took astronauts secretly to the moon to build an underground lunar base in the 1950s. That's all in Project Horizon, 300 and something planned pages, military, government, how to build a underground base on the moon. Then later, Wernher von Braun developed these circular type of space stations that are cloaked with artificial gravity. He was showing schematics of this on Disney films in the 1950s, 60s. Then he became head of NASA. He became the boss, the project boss in NASA. And he was literally reverse engineering UFO crafts. They had a UFO craft in a warehouse in cold storage, which he showed to Uri Geller, who is a psychic in his own right, and a researcher too. And this is what's launched those programs, because they built bases on Mars in 1970s, 80s, and onwards in the 2000s. Wernher von Braun wrote books about how to get to Mars. He presented all kinds of schematics of how to build craft in Collier's magazine, how to build underground bases and surface bases covered with electromagnetic dome shielding on the surface of Mars. So Wernher von Braun is the poster child, the man who launched the US space program.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I'm just going to do a little bit more recap, and then we'll come back to present day. So there's this really obscure documentary about the esoteric history of humanity, which says that initially the purpose for human creation was the fact that there was too much diversity in the reincarnation cycle of the ETs, meaning that, for example, a reptilian couldn't reincarnate as like a mantid being. They wanted a universal type of humanity, and that was actually the impetus. A new, a more all-encompassing type that would also, like I said, host a Batal type of spirit. And so now we're jumping to Atlantis. The shift from 4D to 3D, which was at the end of Atlantis, was apparently due to a pole flip. To start with, it was caused by the fall of Atlantis by a group of renegade students, initiates. They weren't even, all the way priests, and they were experimenting with the primordial sound, and they got too ahead of themselves, and they caused a huge set off a huge gravitational bomb. And anyway, that was the inception of the Dark Brotherhood, or also known as Red Dragon faction, and the other one was the Golden Dragon, so it says. And so anyway, that's when Atlantis went from being, very rich in spirit and very at one with the laws of nature and with the, spirit of creation and stuff like that. And it went into more separation and polarity and individualism. But none of this was accidental, because actually, despite these two main parties, there was a galactic confederation that all throughout was overseeing this and sent messengers on Earth and overlooked this whole thing, because actually the Illuminati, the Dark Brotherhood, whatever you want to call it, are gatekeepers of knowledge, yes, but that's also because from, a bird's eye point of view, access to this type of knowledge, this type of occulted knowledge, is actually quite dangerous to just give it to someone like the ENKs, like the people after the fall. So they had to learn it gradually and through experience and through going through all these ordeals. Well, I just wanted to present both sides. Now I wanted to make parallels with Farsight. So because it's not just the ETs, although, it's not just physical, our enemies, it's also a spiritual war. And I'm going to refer to two of their very best episodes, which are one about Lucifer and one about who's controlling the reptilians. So in the one about Lucifer, it's well known from a lot of Western religion and also even the Urantia book and other sources that there is a devil. Translated originally, actually, it means the adversary. And he is extremely powerful. He, if we go by the biblical text, he was the most powerful angel that wanted to usurp the God's throne and consider himself unequal, wanted to go toe to toe. And when Farsight did, probes into his mind, they sensed an extremely dark personality, very service to self, like just the embodiment of service to self. That he had a lot of charm, but it's just not a likable, not a pleasant person to be around. He had a lot of subservient entities of all types of races, and they themselves are powerful, but unaware, actually, to a large degree of their power, and that's because they were being manipulated by him, and not just linearly, but he's very much a time manipulator as well. He was, though, to start with, created with a purpose, to offset the peace that existed with chaos. That was his purpose. But the thing is, it got out of hand and he went rogue, totally out of control. And that's why actually our whole universe is now in trouble, you could say. And also an interesting aside is that Princess, one of their viewers, asked if the reptilians are actually followers of him. They said that they influence him, but it's true that a lot of them do follow, but not all. And also not all reptilians are bad, but actually a majority of them are. I mean, not bad, but not exactly good, just regressive, I guess. They lack compassion. They lack empathy. They are very much racist. They consider themselves to be the rulers and everyone else is inferior. And they using, this is the other remote viewing, they noticed the viewers that they rely heavily on AI enhancements and they themselves are controlled by it, by AI, which is actually foreign to this galaxy. In the galaxy that it originates from, it completely subjugated the entire place, which even appears in a couple of SSP testimonies that they sent ships there and they were completely taken over by AI, by the black goo. And either way you look at it, the upshot of this remote viewing is that transhumanism, which is what their end goal is a form of enslavement, simply by virtue of the fact that for every advantage that it has, it's a double-edged sword. It also makes you more of a vulnerability. I mean, it makes you an access point in all those strengths as well. So you're able to be controlled easily. So now, I'm going to jump to present day events, and I'm going to get to the your own remote viewing soon. So let's just cut to the chase. How we got in this current turmoil in terms of at least the SSP side of things, which started with actually not the Greta Treaty, and not even the one in 44. It started in 1934. This is from James Casbold's book, Buried Alive. And it was the treaty with the Orion Greys, which involved trading humans that would be memory repressed in exchange for technology of all sorts, like free energy, environmental, medical, time manipulation, anti-gravity, so on. And so it would be too long to expand on that too much. So cut to today, we have 1.4 thousand deep underground military bases, with approximately 2 being built each year in the US. Their average depth is 4.25 miles. Their average size is about the medium city from the above ground. And the average cost of building it is $30 billion, which incidentally is of drug money, which is also instigated by the 3-letter agencies. So, like Farside noted, after human trafficking, drugs and weapon smuggling are the biggest money makers. So these dams also average 15,000 workers. They were done through nuclear-powered drills, which create that smooth glass around the tunnels. And of course, the dams are the bases, not the tunnels. And Casbold also mentioned that the Confederation is actually made of Pleiadians, Andromedans, Lyrans, people from Procyon, Umo, Tau Ceti, and Sirius A, and that they refuse to be co-opted into the what's called military-industrial extraterrestrial complex, which is made of the Greys and the Reptilians. And just quickly about the Orion Greys, sorry, I forgot to mention that they initially looked human. They were captured 891,000 years ago. They were escaping Zeta 1 and 2. An Orion subject race of the Draco captured them and killed most of their females, genetically altered the rest. The males they enslaved and put to mine work and afterwards killed. And that's actually their MO. This is not just an exception. So yeah, I wanted to ask you if you could maybe add some insight about some of the more secretive bases that you have discovered through remote viewing.
Yeah, so This happened in February 12th, 11th, 12th, and 13th, 2023. I was remote viewing a satellite spy probe that was doing reconnaissance and surveillance of the water and land, Alaska, United States. The probe was flying above Alaska. It has some anti-gravity propulsion system inside it. The source of it is anti-gravitic. It was cylindrical, the size of a car, like a medium-shaped car, but it has the cylindrical shape, like typical, cigar-shaped crafts that the SSP have. This was smaller scale, cylindrical with round edges, and it was spying on the 4 D.U.M.s bases. 3 of them are under land, under Alaska, and 1 is in the water, deep in the water. This is all under Alaska. So these bases do reverse engineering of UFO craft. They're also spying on other nations to learn their secrets. It's D.U.M.s bases. So this satellite probe was trying to surveil what these bases are doing to get intel on the bases. Trajectory point for how to take them down. It was just spy reconnaissance, and it has satellite connections with antennas to space satellites where all of this information was going before the probe was shot down by NORAD. So that probe wasn't necessarily a bad thing that was shot down, but anything in their airspace, they will shoot down what they don't understand or even fully know about. So I don't think that probe was good or bad per se. It was intel gathering. Not sure who the group completely is, but it was to take down those 4 D.U.M.s bases. And then there have been instances of Chinese and Russian warships patrolling Alaska. Last year and this year, 11 warships, Chinese/Russian warships that the U.S. Had to sort of escort out of Alaskan airspace and out of the waters. Again, why would you want to put so much attention on Alaska? What's in Alaska? Those 4 D.U.M.s bases. They were trying to surveil where those bases are and to take them out. There was this Admiral Gorbachev frigate, Russian frigate with Zircon missiles. Earlier this year, like January, February, it was supposed to go for training in the Indian Ocean with Chinese and the Indian Navy for, usual military practices that they do. They always do these exercises, military exercises, every couple of years, and it veered off course, went into Atlantic to the Bermuda area. Then it secretly again changed course and went to the Pacific Ocean to target Alaska to try to destroy those 4 bases. If they would have used those Zircon missiles, it goes at Mach 9 speed. That would have taken out Alaska, that would have taken British Columbia and California and San Francisco. So I had to portal that ship back to the Atlantic Ocean, put an energetic block on it and an energetic shield around it, and portal it out back to where it was supposed to go, because I thought I could use an electrical surge to destroy it, but that destroys the missiles on it, and it can take out land masses too. I know this sounds all weird. Like, how can she portal out a huge ship that's a warship? That was something I was assigned as a mission by Time Corporations, which is like the time police. And I live in British Columbia, so if I had done something to destroy that Russian frigate, I would have been destroyed too. So I couldn't take it out by sending an electrical surge of energy to take the ship down, because it could take the ship down, then the missiles go off and you still have the same effect, which is no good. So there's also a D.U.M.s base not too far away from my house, because I'm in South Surrey, White Rock area, and I'm close to the Bellingham US border. and that D.U.M.b.s base is right under it. And that between Canada and US border, and I've seen triangular crafts and saucer-shaped crafts flying over my house over these areas, and I suspect that's because it goes to the D.U.M.b.s base. There's also tunnel systems, like ancient extraterrestrial and man-made tunnel systems connecting Canada, where I am, to NORAD in the US, Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, and other places that NORAD has its facilities. So, and they monitor UFO activity too, what comes in and out of our Earth airspace and, you know, space above Earth, 80,000 feet above in the atmosphere. So they monitor like UFOs and track UFOs. So there's like tunnel systems and D.U.M.b.s bases all over Canada and the US.
Right. Wow. But just to go back to what you said about spotting a lot of UFO ships, we also need to keep in mind the fact that due to geoengineering, our atmosphere has become so electrified, so ionized, that they can actually project anything with ease just in these days. So it's very much true that there's a good reason for that, which they want to hide themselves. But that also means that you can't fully trust just because you see it. You know, they put illusions in the sky often as well. And the other things that they do, according to Ileana, who is one of the most famous in this field, they are responsible for the fires through, you know, more geophysical manipulation, but also for affecting the Birkeland currents, which is through chemical electromagnetic type of, you know, HARP, which is, you know, the kind of tool for DARPA. And apparently there's no more natural weather anymore. It just starts out in the South Pacific, but after that it's completely controlled. And they also have directed energy weapons, but not quite as we think. It's more in the sense of technology that we actually carry on ourselves, like Internet of Things type of thing, which don't just have the civilian use, they actually also have very much the military use. And they manipulate us neurally in all sorts of ways. So I just wanted to splice that in. And before I move on to the manipulation of the children, I wanted to also cover this more spiritual type, which is the fact that we have to face the fact that we are being used somewhat as a battery. So Dr. Corrado Malanga is an abduction lifelong researcher. He's also a doctor in like organic chemistry, but his conclusions after a lifetime of studying this is that military and intelligence agencies have been working as proxies for ETs, fulfilling their agendas. And the Germans, for example, are trapped and acting under orders, which, you know, is well known, but it's nice to get confirmation from. All his information is derived from hypnosis regressions that he does himself. He's gotten very good at. And so yeah, the human soul is the most targeted here because, so he noticed three main components. We have the soul, the mind, and the spirit. The soul is the feminine side, the spirit is the masculine, and the mind is just more of the interface and the memory part of things. But he didn't jump to this conclusion, you know, lightly. The problem is that most of the regressive ETs have their soul either completely repressed or non-existent. That's why they're so desperate for us. Then also we need to be on the lookout for the fact that they can implant what he coined active alien memories, which is often done as a result of, I mean, they're often enforced as a result of having a chip in you, which is, you know, you're a target whenever you go under anesthetic to be having a chip implanted. They're very small these days. And also, it appears that a lot of what we think, well, not all, of course, but when we hear of accounts of past lives that seem a little, you know, dodgy, or when we hear multiple people saying that there's the same past life, this is actually a feature of the fact that you have these aliens that I don't know if you want to say possess, but definitely inhabit your mind and take over, and to a large degree, not all the time, but a lot. And implant these AAMs, these memories, because they actually use us as storage, actually to prolong their lives. To even this goes for corporeal and incorporeal. Even these, the incorporeal split into categories. The one that originate in this universe and from a pocket universe. It's very complex, but anyway, they also, these regressives, he noticed that they clone us. The reason why they clone us before they send us on a mission is because they don't want to risk losing these memories that they stored, that they live through us. Because, well, if you want to go by Jessica Zabodar, which is one of the main Illuminati whistleblowers, he claims that the whole reason for this possession from the aliens, why they can take over your mind, is the fact that, going back to Lucifer, his army, which is vast, a third of what's called the heavenly realm or whatever, they want to piggyback on us because of our souls, which, as I said, are very advanced, pretty much the latest in the galaxy, at least, the latest and greatest. And aliens, let's say, according to this theory, they want to piggyback on us to go back and enter the courts of heaven. That's just one theory. I wanted to mention that. But so yeah, they want to bend us to their will, and this is the bottom line of the alien agenda. They mostly have spirit plus mind, and actually the secret of the tree of life is that human DNA contains this compatibility with the frequency of the soul with a capital S. And it's not even as prevalent as you would think in humans, having a soul. A large swath of humans don't even have soul, and those are just stuck in somewhere in the subtle planes, in a sort of prison themselves, somewhere above Earth, around Earth, because we're in a sort of prison. According to Max Pierce, Saturn projects this false reality, which Saturn used to be a small sun. This was a binary system. And anyway, it projects this false reality, and it's being amplified by the moon. He wasn't just, he wasn't pulling this out of his, mind. It was actually shown to him after someone, speaking of possession, he was given a drink and, tied up, and someone tried to actually, through invocation and magic, what's called dark magic, someone tried to summon a demon, a minotaur that had been in torpor, had been, just chained for thousands of years, but they weren't compatible, luckily for him. But afterwards, he was picked up by a gargoyle and showed that there are multiple layers of prison systems on top of the earth. And they said that they belong to Alpha Draconis. They were the ones who planted them there. And they entail things such as religion, which even atheism, if you get stuck in atheism, that counts as well. And of course, all the other wrong thinkings, pitfalls. And these parasitic entities apparently are emanations of this Lucifer entity. But according to this Italian doctor, what's called Yahweh is the primordial man, which only appears to be an old figure and fatherly, is actually himself more of a fish being. And that's also, you can notice that in some of the symbolism related to Christ and Christianity, the fish, Anyway, and that's also kind of interesting because you would think that the higher you go, the more advanced, but in the more sophisticated in morphology, but actually fish predated even reptilians. Reptiles, anyway. So yeah, this is one way for these incorporeals to possess us and to manifest control over what's called the primordial man. And they also make use of biological machines such as the small grays. Of course, everyone knows they're copies themselves of servant beings. They only have the mind component. They are mentally very strong. They have this magic stick as well. They're very telepathic, and they stink like hell. But they're pretty much fair to consider them inimical to humanity. There's also the oranges, which are gray, sort of cross between Greys and Nordics. They're 2 meters tall. They have vertical pupils. They're suntanned. There's all sorts of aliens. Anyway, the praying mantises, which have the green chitinous shell, they're 9 feet tall. They're also called the imperial mantids. They are also part of this hierarchy, around comparable in stature to the reptilians. They work together, actually. They are the ones who leased the green regeneration technology, green regen, thanks to the Germans. And then you have, of course, reptilians. And I also wanted to ask if you can, spill the beans on some of the ETs that you have been abducted by.
Yeah, I was abducted by black Drazo reptilians who are 14 feet tall, like black, the scales, the ridges, black skin, in a black armored suit, and also Sharab Invictus reptilians, yellow greenish ones that are, if you could think of a kind of, it's literally is a Invictus type of a energy draining reptilian being that wants to ruin your blood, wants to ruin your immune system, wants to boil the blood. So the black trouser reptilian was the soldier. It comes in through a dark black portal, takes the child, the victim, me, takes the child out of the crib. This was in Ukraine when I was about 2-4. Takes the child through the black portal, through the tunnel system, because again, Kharkiv, Ukraine, there's tunnel systems under. It leads to Rostov, Russia, and then it leads to the Caucasian Mountains, where the D.U.M.b.s base is underground. There's human military Russian personnel just doing their thing in the D.U.M.b.s base, doing their operations. Then these are the 2 reptilian sets, the Black Drazo and the Sharab Invictus, literally like a succubus type, Invictus type, and they're like 10 to 12 feet tall. They were shorter. Apparently they come from the Orion system, but they weren't doing the human farming to eat children. They were doing the energy draining medical experiments on the kids. And I was strapped to a silver chair with metal hooks and stuff, and they were doing experiments, dermally injected nanite stuff into my bloodstream, and it did a bunch of horrible medical things, injected me with some kind of a virus that made me paralyzed, unconscious, 3 weeks in the hospital with a fever. I lived, I survived. I ended up with a bunch of autoimmune disorder medical issues after that, which has taken me a long time to fix with plasma injections, human plasma injections, to clean out all that crap that they did on me. So this is what I was exposed to. And I saw children in cages, or kids shackled to the walls, to the rough-hewn tunnel system walls where the D.U.M.b.s base is on the way to the base. And they were malnutrition, didn't have clothes on. Some of them were naked. So these are the memories that I got from QHHT, quantum healing hypnosis, in, I think it was 2015 when I had that done. The practitioner is Dolores Cannon certified. So, and that was about 3 hours. So we talked about what these reptilians did. And so there's medical experiments. There's also human farming, literal farms where they were petri dishing, growing kids and abducting kids to eat and to literally steal their energy to empower themselves, the Dracos, to be immortal, literally. They take the energy. I'm not going to say which chemical they extracted. We all know what that is. I'm not going to say it. But they extracted the chemical from the kids, and it would invigorate the reptilians. It would literally make them high and so excited, the Dracos. And they would literally eat the children live and suck their blood, revel in sucking their blood. I've never seen kids being eaten, but I've experienced medical experiments and seen that. Different sorts of reptilians, because they come from the Orion Empire, they come from Alpha Draconis, they come from different systems as well, because you have your Draco reptilians, then you have your Alpha Draconians, then you have your winged Sayakar reptilians. There's different types. There's also the Black Drazo, the Sharab Invictus. There's different species of reptilians. It's not just one doing this thing, it's many different ones. Not all of them are bad, but predominantly there is an agenda: abducting kids, medical experiments, and eating children and torturing adults for information and the like. So that's been going on for thousands of years, because again, they are AI controlled. There's also a genetic mutation, and there was a genetic mutation in Draco reptilians to literally participate in cannibalism, to eat human flesh, because it's a genetic mutation that the AI programming instigated. Originally, the Dracos were lizard people. They were humanoid lizard type beings in that other universe, coexisting peacefully until they encountered replicator ships with this AI, this bad AI, that literally takes DNA of the beings that come near these ships, and it mutates it and morphs it into the most aggressive type of DNA that the species can evolve into. And that's what created the Dracos, the flesh-eating mutation in their genetic components. It literally ruined their genetics to create the Dracos. And then these replicator ships, they had map systems of how to come to our universe to perpetuate eating flesh beings, to continue this evolution of the morphology and the most aggressive thing can be in evolution, which is the Dracos eating living beings. So they were voracious, and they came to our universe to continue doing this because they had ruined their universe. AI took over and ruined their universe, infested it. So they were running out of resources and came here to continue to do this here. And Earth was one of the points of entry, I guess, to do collateral. We're the collateral damage of all of this.
Yeah, we're living in very disputed territory. It's been in the middle of extremely tyrannical, oppressive system of government that has been around for as long as humanity has been around. And the main perpetrators in terms of humanity, as far as pretty much all these sources have been able to identify, at least, are the reptilians, and of course their subject race, the Greys, and the Orions, which are represented by the Olympian gods. So now that you shared your testimony about your childhood travails, I wanted to also gloss over Alex Collier's video that he sat on for decades until he was ready this year to share. In '94, he was shown this on Andromeda and Mothership, that the victim of these regressives, specifically Draconians, were so removed from reality that they were oftentimes blind. They preferred, but weren't limited to, children. They even had adults. And the reason why they prefer children is because they have less injections, and they don't smoke, and just more tender. And they wouldn't just torture them. They would sleep deprive them and not let them even faint. And they would scare them continuously until they reach the threshold. That would be the point where they would start eating, when that certain chemical is the richest. And they also use very unsightly tactics, such as torturing siblings one in front of the other, just cycling between them, and then eating them at once. And they would also prolong this process to as many hours as they possibly could. They had it down to a science. And apparently it goes back to how they treat their own. And in this video, he was also shown how some of these children were plugged into devices that harvested fluids and tortured them at the same time. So they were even using technology for this. And anyway, I wanted to move on to the testimony of Jesse Zaboter, very detailed and compelling. testimony of a person who escaped the Illuminati, the Dark Brotherhood system. She was actually slated to become the Queen Mother of Darkness in her youth, until she escaped in a miraculous story. I'm not going to share here; it's too long. And anyway, she was involved in the Star Wars program, the Phoenix. I mean, no, not the Phoenix, but she knows about it. In the Voice of God, and in Looking Glass. And there also, she mentions there are Jedi programs, what you called, and First Earth Battalion, which is actually pure spirit warfare. And they also go for both good and darker objectives. It's very nuanced. It's very stratified, and they involve alchemy and blood magic. That's how they can work in the spiritual planes. And in addition to the Queen Mothers of Darkness, on the other side of the spectrum, you have the Morning Stars and the Sisters of Light. Actually, if you want to look at the Dark Brotherhood hierarchy, below the Queen Mother of Darkness, you have what's called the Druidic or Satanic Council, which is made of high priests. And under that, you have this illusion of separation that they have instigated, which is the main 5 factions: the Masons, the Mormons, the Luciferians.
You have your cabal
the
types.
Jesuits. You have the
Jesuits,
Jesuit
Jesuits, cabals, elites,
and the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah,
yeah, Kabbalah,
that's the last one.
the Kabbalah.
So that's intentionally made that way so people take sides, and it's actually, even within their circles, it's not as straightforward as you would think, because they also use front people who are actually, for all intents and purposes, are well oriented, such as Manly P. Hall, who was a very famous Mason. But they want to actually, they have been planning this false awakening and this new religion that you could call a new age religion, that acts as like an umbrella for all the others, and that will be able to, through miracles and wonders, convince everyone of their supremacy. And that it's actually, according to Zabotar, the light side, which is this fake one, which is actually has its headquarters in the Sanhedrin, is much more dangerous than the dark side, which is actually not even that powerful anymore, which deals with blood sacrifices and all those things, which they're now more, involved around the technology and the things. And in regards to the assets, as they're called, the majority of them are expendables, and they are also, a lot of them, orphans. So they're used, obviously, sexually, and they also make it so whenever they're involved in rituals, so they're willing, they're gaslit. They put Stockholm syndrome on them very early on. So these also, they have like certain stones that they identify depending on, because the point of these rituals actually is for the perpetrators to access spiritual gates. And each child has a certain different proclivity in regards to the density that they can access. Some see better into the lower astral, some see into the higher, the heavenlies. And yeah, they have these designations. For example, it could be a color on their clothes, and that's how in these parties they know which one to pick, and it's never accidental. And so they are harvested, of course, for organs, for the substance, the aforementioned. They are also turned into ashes or diamonds. So when you have elites wearing diamonds, yeah, there's a high probability that they're expendables. And even the red shoes that are much publicized that the Pope wears, apparently, according to her, those are made of child skin. But regarding the ashes, this was maybe the most, revolting of all these nuggets, is that they cremate the children and then they pepper them inside of foodstuffs that everyone has access to, especially powdery stuff like oatmeal, cereal, but also even flour. and just condiments. So it's open to everyone. And the reason being is that they want to curse humanity because they were bequeathed the earth and they want to change that in their favor. That's the thinking. And so, yeah, you have 800,000 missing children per year just in the USA alone. And a lot of them obviously are using these breeding programs, which they help for life. And I don't know if you want to add something to that before I go to the hunting parties and the bloodline children.
Yeah, so as regards to our food sources, it's also like crickets, cockroaches, kinds of worms and other things like of the bug variety that's being added to our food to modify the food stuff. So when you're reading ingredients lists, if you find crickets as one of the ingredients, that's not pure food anymore. That's modified food source. So it's like, it's not just ingredients of these poor children, it's also like bugs being added to the food. And they want to create fake artificial meat to remove all the farms and the animals, to remove organic farming of poultry and stuff and beef. They want to remove organic meat from the system and create these manufacturing plants that just do fake meat substitute. So you're no longer ingesting nutrients from organic food. You're eating now modified food completely that is fake meat, not real, not from free range animals that are there's different types of farming animals, some more organic and free range, which is, you know, not mistreating animals, and there's the farms that have the animals shackled and then kill the animals. So that's not good source of animal anything. So they just want to eliminate free range farming of poultry and animals and just have us eat replicated meat that is disgusting.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm glad you added that. And in contrast to the expendables, you also have the bloodline children, which one of the main ways they get initiated into the Brotherhood system is through these hunting parties, which were disclosed in the movie The Hunt. So they're, to begin with, both sets of children are set in these cages underground. And until nightfall, when in a retreat in the forest next to this mansion, they are released and literally hunted. They are said to like just play hide and seek. And of course, no one escapes. And the survivors are, well, abused, and you can fill in the blanks. And that they also made to blaspheme during that as part of the induction. And the bloodline children, you can't completely fault them either, because they're made to take secrecy vows. They're not even death is an option, and they're not even threatening them so much as they're threatening to kill their close ones. This is how they get to them, and they invariably do get to them. And it gets to the point that they indoctrinated them so much that they get a taste, a feel for it, and get to enjoy it and actually proliferate it and, you know, subject other people to it. But the thing we need to remember about these bloodline assets is that they have no other basis, no other example of reality. This is all they know. All their life is just taking orders. And of course, this goes back to negative ETs as well. You know, the blame is kind of split there. It's kind of ambiguous, but certainly wouldn't have happened without the interference of the negative ETs. So yeah, and this whole mechanism for torture started with Mengele. His experiments of subjecting twins to this, you know, torture so that they leave their body, go into, and they prefer the ones that don't leave their body when they're tortured, because they are the ones that can remember better. They can enter the spiritual plane at their leisure. So they make a point to, you know, use those kids much more and to memory repress them more. And also they did all sorts of tests in those, you know, early German Nazi era. They tried to take the soul out of one twin and put it in the other twin to see if multiple souls can animate the same body, just to see if it would be more powerful. And a lot of failed and despicable experiments like that. And also when the children would dissociate and would leave their physical body, that's when they would try to superimpose other beings, entities on top of them. And they even have roasting pans that literally, it's not just meme in children's cartoons. They sometimes puts like your sibling in roasting pan and cook them alive as part of the initiation stages. And yeah, they got it down to a science these days where they can just scan your spirit and which of the four elements you have more proclivity for, and as well as which of the planes of existence you are more attuned to. And yeah, these spiritual gates are lesser talked about, but they're kind of the big deal. They are how they call in a lot of these lower astral entities. And just as an example, Max Pierce was told that 9/11 was a ritual to open a huge lower astral gate between the towers. And it happens throughout the world. And that was Aleister Crowley who first came up with that idea.
And yeah, I'm familiar with Aleister Crowley, because when you study light magic, dark magic, you're taught that there's these portal seals all over the planet. Some of them are higher energy seals, some of them are lower, and they open up the gates to the hell worlds and other places in different dimensions where different beings come in. Some of these hell worlds, they're not like hell virtually, they're just worlds with darker aspects where different beings live, and sometimes they can sneak into Earth, and these portal seals have elaborate types of images on them, crowns, certain types of rubies, like red symbols, even gold things, and that if you break these seals, you can have the apocalypse and the hell world start on Earth. The Shining, the
end times.
Yeah, the end times are the second coming, kind of like, and that's supposed to cleanse the earth of all its sins and restart it and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that's a huge agenda. And just to finish up with the methods of fracturing, they actually start as early as the womb. They have this moonchild ritual, which is just put the mother through a traumatic event, or they can even do this thing where they cover up the parents' deaths and they steal their children afterwards. This happens, for example, especially with bloodline people. They're the ones that they go to these lengths. And also, you do not want to let child protective services enter your house. You want to keep them at arm's length because they are very much involved in this. They sell you basically your children oftentimes to the Illuminati using their dirty judges, and whenever they do a placement of a child, they get $40,000, and you should just use a Fourth Amendment right if you're in the USA to not answer the door when they knock. And yeah, there's also the reason why they sometimes attach dark spirits to your compartments that they create in your mind during these torture sessions is so that the essence can keep track of time, because there is no time in the subtler planes, or it functions extremely differently. So, and you can look at it as the main mind as a file drawer, and each compartment is files, and the whole drawer has a gatekeeper, and each file has spirits as well. So it's kind of a maze that you have to navigate. It's difficult, but in the same time, the Bodar says that you shouldn't even look at it as mind fracture or mind splitting or whatever, because that would kind of be, they want you to believe that they have that power to split you, to separate you. But really, you can integrate yourself if you just take a more holistic approach and cast off those negative entities and basically rebuke them in whatever way you can. We're going to come back to the remedies, so to speak, at the end of this. And lastly, about Zabodar, she mentions that there are real so-called vampires that use the blood banks to feed themselves, that the Illuminati oftentimes place their priestesses as nurses in hospitals to just hex various people. That also the cremation fad lately is also they're doing. They want to actually just use your body for organ trafficking. Sure. Yeah, so lastly about this, according to Zabotar, as many as 7 out of 10 people are unintentionally doing the bidding of the Dark Brotherhood system to various degrees. Obviously, the majority of them are unaware of it, but a lot of them, like doctors and lawyers and politicians, are complicit enough to, be accountable, held accountable. So now we're moving on to I make no secrets, he's my favorite whistleblower, just because it's the juiciest of all the testimonies, and he's Donald Marshall. And he is the biggest source of the biggest rat on the Illuminati. He explains cloning quite well. He explains that there are 2 types. You have replication and duplication. The replication is the one that we all have come to know, which is from a cell, which also is, if you think about it, it's not quite cloning in the, a la carte way, because that's supposed to be from a non-replicating cell. But either way, it basically makes a perfect copy of you from birth. But what the Illuminati rely on to a large degree is duplication cloning, which they used to need tissue sample from you, but these days they only need a bit of blood, and they can create, for all intents and purposes, perfect lookalike of you. It basically thinks as well as you and acts, but they fast grow it inside 5 months with only $30 worth of maintenance. They feed you with a feeding tube, this beige liquid, and the thing about it is that it's not permanent. It basically recreates you in the point in time that they first picked up that sample from you. So if you're, let's say, very overweight, you're going to come out overweight. But they do have ways to manipulate them as well, so make them perfect. For example, when they clone celebrities that say are paralyzed, they're going to make them not paralyzed. And they have ways to even to buff them up, to create them more, make them more attractive, and to tinker with them. They have it down, And they have also 4 marks. The first mark was the most primitive by far, started in Germany, 40s, and it was full of faults, not just visual, but also mind-wise. And they malfunctioned, and they scrapped those. They rely on Mark IIs. They only last between 6 months and a year, at most 2 years. But they also create multiple duplicates of you, just in case you come out a little warped. They need to be turned around in the tank a lot, which is liquid, of course. And then you're kept on this 5-high rack that they can, at any point, just press a button as long as you enter REM sleep. So before I go into REM sleep, to finish up with the clones, Mark II clones are not perfect either. They are little loopy, as he says. They are also more emotional. You would think they wouldn't be, but they are. They cry a lot. And the thing about their degradation is that their minds don't last that much, and also their skins have developed rashes. And so now for the REM transfer. So REM is the deepest stage of sleeping out of the 5 by far. You enter it about 1.5 to 2 hours into sleeping, and your brain waves are as ample and as powerful as though you were awake, but you are also paralyzed by your own body, except for the involuntary organs, because specifically so you don't injure yourself. And that's also the stage where you have the most vivid dreams. The rest are just bits and pieces. And your left brain, your left hemisphere of the brain is a little suppressed. But anyway, the thing is, when you enter the sleep stage, as long as you have a chip in you, which is very easy for them to acquire, to plant, they can just at the press of a button transfer your consciousness inside one of these duplication clones, which they can grow you in one of their many cloning centers, which predominantly are underground, but there are even a few above ground. And the Illuminati, using the Greys, at least in this case, have the brain entirely mapped out. They basically have no secrets. All that's left now is to augment the brain. And the reason why they use recent clones of you is because they will feel the least foreign when you inhabit them. Otherwise, you get really intimidated or just go catatonic if, for example, you're put into an opposite sex clone or a child's clone, but they do that too. They abuse that too, of course, but not so much, just for certain scenarios. So just as an example of the realness of this phenomenon, you have super soldiers. For one, you have James Rink, who is used this way. He was actually used as a torture spectacle by a lot of them. They have this oftentimes arenas in these centers, and they stand there in the hundreds and watch as people get either tortured or they get used to extract information or certain skills. Like Donald Marshall was a musical prodigy. They extracted in total about, I would calculate, and it's about 10,000 songs from him. So James Rink was actually lauded. It was enjoyable at the Celebrity Cloning Center for the elites to watch him, to subject him to these scenarios, which he didn't see as being himself as being in an arena. He simply was put through these trials to test how quickly he would shed tears in this one case. And his refusal to cry is why, and his pain tolerance is why they treasured him, so to speak. They put needles under his nails and all sorts of things. Also, they can keep your memory repressed, especially if they give you truth serum and find out that you are likely to dish out on them, to spill the beans on their evil doings there. James Casbolt, also was a multi-cloning center victim. He was also used in sword fights there. They have death sports in this arena oftentimes, different sports, and it's to the death, and they film all of it and archive it, and they get off on it. And so you have a lot of D.U.M.s, like I said, and a lot of levels. For example, in Dulce, they even had what's called a nightmare hall that was the most depraved, because they spliced humans with just about anything under the sun. And it said that it was so bad that this was told to Max Pierce that it wouldn't be allowed to ever happen again. It was game over. And they're apparently getting slowly cleansed out, these D.U.M.s, but it's not, the fight is not even close to being over yet. And these D.U.M.s are built apparently in the shape of oftentimes upside down Christmas tree for structural stability. And yeah, I just was wondering if you could maybe go into some of the lesser known, like Antarctic cloning centers, because Donald Marshall only sticks to the one which is near you, 5 hours away from you, from Vancouver, in a radius, in a protected place in British Columbia.
Yeah, like what I heard, if you have specific dreams in the REM sleep state, they can get you through your dreams. Or if you stop dreaming altogether, you might be cloned. So that's some of the stuff. I did read Donald Marshall stuff, and it's interesting. There is a huge cloning center in Antarctica, not too far away from McMurdo Station. Like it's an underground cavern system, like the entrance. So, and when you go in, right, you see people hanging on racks for bodies, for the soul to be prepped. It's soul cooking for that. They abduct humans and extraterrestrials into this cloning center. They can trap the soul from their original body in an electromagnetic container and put it on into the bodies of the clones. Some of the clones are even used for harvesting their organs or their original humans. And they've studied extraterrestrial bodies from crash site retrievals of UFO crafts, like how their biology works, if they can replicate them with fish tails, like if they can replicate their biology and clone it. Some of it failed because extraterrestrial biology can be completely different in genetics from humans or similar. They've created chimeras even in these experiments. So they know extraterrestrial biology pretty well in this cloning center in Antarctica. And they've transferred bodies of clones and extraterrestrials in these cryogenic coffins, if you will, stasis pod coffins, and transferred them in Lockheed Martin reverse engineered anti-gravity crafts, Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, and by train. So they've been able to transfer them to different facilities for study as well. So this is one of the biggest cloning centers in Antarctica that I remote viewed. It's like organ harvesting, cloning, soul cooking, spirit cooking, soul transference, studying extraterrestrial bodies, live and dead. They also do operations on extraterrestrials to save them and then study their biology and put them on ice in these stasis coffins. And they transport them to different military industrial science labs or bioengineering labs to study. Area 51 does cloning and bioengineering through plasma and growing, maturating clone bodies of people, then putting memories of those people in those bodies. And they think they're real, and they've hybridized gray DNA with human DNA with these hybrids that were integrated with humans to see if they can create a new human gray species that will last or not. They have psionic abilities. So this is what I'm familiar with in terms of cloning centers, Antarctica and Area 51. S1, bioengineering lab, under, you have your human surface base buildings in Area 51, then you have S1, S2, S3, S4, that's huge, and 5, 6, and then they have their generator hub stations with all their electronics and monitoring and surveillance. So it's a huge facility.
Interesting, yeah. Donald Marsh had hinted to Antarctica and Area 51, but he didn't know much detail, so I'm glad you confirmed that. And no episode about the enemies of humanity would be complete without just a crash course on the Vill. So it's weird that they call themselves that, because you also have the Vill Society, which is supposedly not necessarily good, but at least neutral, of those pretty, Vill Damen. But this is what they call themselves. So they, I'm talking about short and very creepy looking, about 1.5 to 2 feet tall saurian reptilian race, and they have, so first of all, their voices sound like they swallowed helium, and they have claws instead of fingers, and their eyes are on stilts, and they have different races. Some have red scales, some have tan scales, some have black. And so our history with them goes back to at least Atlantean times, because, well, spoiler alert, they've been used to body snatch people as far back as then. And they also were heavily involved with Nazis finding out about the Atlantean base. They apparently pointed on the map where they could find it. They're all over the world, by the way. They hide themselves. They have a very parasitic mentality. You're never going to find out about them. It's a very well-kept secret, but it's finally coming out now. So they have a biological property, which is called body snatching. They can take you over completely in terms of your mind, and they just piggyback, like we mentioned. But because they have this long history with Earth, they're much more dangerous, and they walk amongst us, because by now they have been used by these shadow government to replace problem people, because they make for good slaves. So the way they do it, the body snatching, is not magic. They simply have a proboscis, protuberation on their heads, through which they, one time in their life, eject their brain and spinal cord, which most of their brain is spinal cord, and it comes out as a sort of snake-looking thing, and it's wet and cold and weird. And they also use a slightly younger Vill for this. This is Vill type 1, actually, because they're even capable of body snatching bigger mammals. And anyway, this snake thing then spirals around the optic nerve of the human. It enters through the eye. And for this, obviously, the human host has to be tethered to be tied down by usually other hosts. And once they're in the brain, they go to a certain spot near the center of the brain, driven by taste, and then they excrete this parasitical cell compound and simply take over the brain cell by cell. This is just a complete domination. The old person is gone. I mean, maybe just a shred remains, but it's complete suppression. It's a travesty. I mean, they start off by killing the other person, so there is no room here for compassion or, rights, honestly, even if you're the most beneficial person in the world. And they do prefer humans because they're the smartest and they are perfect. They're gifted at mimicry. Regardless of the species they go into, they just take over. And if you just look at the ants that well documented that they get parasited, they have none of their old personality remains. And why not humans? I mean, so yeah, they're part of a hierarchy. The Vril type 2 are meaner and bigger, but they're also similar in terms of looks, but they don't surface as much. The other Vril, the most meaningful in terms of this count, are the Vril type 3s, which have been disclosed in Star Wars. They're the Camino aliens. And even in Star Wars, the Attack of the Clones, they were the cloners. So they're putting it in your face. And actually part of Star Wars was planned out at the cloning center, the celebrity one, which Queen Elizabeth owns, by the way. The celebrities gather there and elites and discuss stuff every night, George Lucas including, and the main actors from that series. And so the Vril type 3s aren't parasitic, but they are still extremely inimical and dark, and have no problem just sacrificing humans. So they were also disclosed by Phil Schneider, who shot 2 of them when he entered that D.U.M.B. base, and that was, according to Donald Marshall, a ploy, because it gets kind of interesting that apparently so much depravity and so much unrighteousness has been going on in these cloning centers that most of the people don't even, except for the ones in the most power, most want out at this point because they hate the sight of aliens. They have had enough of the murder spectacles. So they're actually, a lot of them, according to Donald Marshall, are rooting for him to succeed in his quest to disclose the stuff, the Vril especially, and because humans still outnumber Vril body snatchers, but they have considerable proportions depending on the country. My best estimation is, I don't know, 10% of humans. And at the same time, these bloodline families have been sacrificing people for too long to be given just amnesty overnight. They have been doing this stuff, incest and cannibalism, but at this point, even they want to put an end to it. And also, regarding the body snatched human hosts, they differentiate themselves in America, for one, by the polka dots patterned mailboxes. Apparently, they run in cliques as well. They have a huge population in Florida. And yeah, the way to tell if someone is body snatched, there are a number of ways. One is through a CT scan. It shows completely differently configuration. And another one is just their behavior, because they act with zero compassion. They act like serial killers. And in fact, Daryl James's XO, executive officer, because he's one of the other whistleblowers on this, he told him that 9 in 10 serial killers are drones. This is the nickname for the parasited hosts using this Vril consciousness, because only they would be capable of these, extremely gruesome acts. And they have been used for so long, and with, as Marshall called it, a heartless and military agenda, especially by the Russian and Chinese governments, that the drones have ended up in very high places all over the world, but none more so than USA. Basically, the US government has been parasited, and yeah, it's tragic. This has been the plan of the Arabs and the Russians and the Chinese people, this is according to Donald Marshall, to undermine the USA and to make it, stop being the major power player. But of these three factions, which he said that Germany, Russia, and China are the most powerful, but the Chinese really don't want this secret out because of all these factions, of all the nations, they have droned more than all the others combined. So they really, they have many cloning centers themselves and are the only ones that exceed even the celebrity cloning center in terms of cruelty and disregard for human rights. This doesn't mean, this is not to say, not even for Marshall, he's no racist at all. It's just the leadership of China is so corrupt that they're death scared of people finding this out. Yeah, he also mentions how aliens are perverts, that they eat humans, that the higher-ups have Vrills as pets and they feed real children to them. We're using spikes, by the way, they don't even have teeth, and that they get high of the blood, just like you said. But the cloning center thing is a major component in all of disclosure because it's happening right under our noses. And it's the main method that the Illuminati use to communicate themselves because it's so foolproof. No one can catch them with this. They started out as only politicians, but then they exploited more and more, starting with celebrities, and they own all movie companies and music studios by now. And they make a competition of who acts the most evil there, just to impress, because it's a vicious cycle. The elites and the politicians, the bloodline people, want to impress the actors, and the actors in exchange get to have a certain say in world affairs. That's kind of unfortunate. But the thing is, the majority of the leaders from the G20 countries attend this cloning center. And the reason why is because it's the rich one where the technology is much better, and also it doesn't have that unpleasant smell that other alien deeper bases have. So also you have all sorts of royalties. The Vill, for example, prefer to body snatch white people. They consider them and the Chinese too, have it in for white people because they consider them the most beautiful and the most varied. They like that. And basically everyone's a target though to these things. All you have to be is attractive or have a certain skill that they want to exploit. So you don't have to be this prodigy, and you can't really consider yourself safe. And I can tell this for sure because I lost count of the people that I know that have been used this way, including some of the smartest and that I considered impervious to these things. No way. Everyone's a target, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, a lot of the higher ups are devil worshippers. They have police and doctors in their pockets to cover up for them. And yeah, the queen and others of them eat babies. That's for, according to them, to maintain their youth. They even, whenever you think you can pull one over on them, they can threaten you with what's called megadeath, which is just transferring you in a clone and killing your clone over and over in all these grotesque ways, either through Vril or what have you, just putting you on a rack. And also just the torture itself can give you a lot of side effects in your real body, to the point where if they apply a constant electric shock, they can actually remotely kill you. And they have done this to many people that don't toe the party line. And yeah, if you become a celebrity, there's pretty much a 99% chance that you will end up there. Best case scenario, they're not going to go through the trouble to clone you there just because they know that you're never going to play by the rules. That's about the best you can hope for. So Donald Marshall is backed up by maybe the coolest bit of proof, physical proof, which is he's on the cover of a Megadeth album called The World Needs a Hero, ironically enough. And they put him there as a joke, just to toy with him, but it came back to bite them because it showed his perfect likeness. It was during one of the torture sessions, they were harvesting him for songs. He's apparently responsible for so many hits that even he lost count. So yeah, the other thing that happens in these cloning centers that is nefarious is they can put MK Ultra visualizations, run you through these scenarios using technology. They, by the way, put these chips, preferably when you're young, so your brain heals using this specialized ice pick. And they can make you think whatever they want. They can torment you. They can, make you go against your own judgment. They can make you like certain people. They can make you hate others. They can even subject you to what's called abduction porn. Well, you can use your imagination there, where they pretend to be ETs, or other times they are ETs, actually. So yeah, and this goes for any high-profile people in the world. Not to say that a lot of them are actually, well, might as well say that he doesn't even mention this in interviews, but he does in private chats and forums, that a lot of the celebrities are actually dug up old-time celebrities from the past, such as, well, Obama, for one, is an ancient pharaoh from Egypt from 5,000 years or so ago. Oprah is one. And they even dig up, Selena Gomez is a nun from Mexico. They do this for multiple reasons, but mostly just to have fun, to test their own power, just because they can. And they dig up, for example, gunslingers from the past, just because they inspired this. They have a face that inspires leadership, and then they place them in high positions. That's just one of the things they do. So what was really, really interesting was during the remote viewing session performed by Farsight on Putin, they noted that he was mind controlled by this lower on the totem pole dark entity. And when the viewer tried to probe into what exactly was responsible for this, he could see in higher up the chain Draco-like beings that, quote, wanted to destroy, bring into the fold, and de-energize the leadership. So that was an indirect confirmation of Donald Marshall. So with regard to the other type of, so their main three secrets, the Illuminatis, according to Donald Marshall, in addition to the cloning, to the body snatching biologically through the Vill, the third one is the body snatching through technology. So their best technology, apparently, is what they dub the Soulstone chip. It started out with billionaires wanting to flaunt their power, and all had this shared dream of prolonging their life. So they put, I don't know, many thousands of Chinese mines and a few $1 billion into this one objective. And to start with, the technology was flawed, and it wasn't so much a chip as a board. But slowly and surely, they did manage to transfer the entire consciousness, all you are, basically all your memories, onto a chip the size of a little bigger than an apple seed. And then the politicians or what have you, when they're on their deathbed, or maybe even sooner if they prefer someone else, someone, can transfer their memories onto someone else. And they actually prefer organic humans because the clones aren't quite old there mentally, and they're also shorter lasting. But the Mark III and IV clones are run around all the time clones. They are much more durable. And Hillary Clinton, for one, is in one of these clones apparently. And just as another example, Eminem has apparently died and has been running around in the clone. But that's not to say that it's a thing. I mean, they do this for people who they want to keep animated, they don't just do
Joe
this for anyone.
Biden, failing
No
clone.
question. I mean, it's a foregone conclusion. I don't think anyone will give you any lip there. So once they got accustomed to putting Donald Marshall in a clone every night, they actually grew attached to him, to the point where they even allowed him to have his memories, because to start with, he was repressed like all of them. And during this time, he pretended to be in league with them very successfully. He even gave himself Stockholm syndrome. And during this time, they disclosed all sorts of secrets, such as that they use death beams to give people cancer. They have nukes on satellites that they can trigger on at any given time. Basically, even North Korea is capable of just leveling the whole planet. And chemtrails also, he heard, have nanites, and they've been infusing the air with them for so much time, at least a couple of decades, that it's very easy for them to project anything in the sky, and also to program people neurologically. But the blue beam plan that came as early as the 70s apparently is scrapped by them. They don't consider it feasible anymore, and it was courtesy of a host idea. And anyway, the depopulation agenda is more so focused on old people. They consider them a waste of resources. They want to shorten our lives. Also, the most complex and maybe intriguing part of his testimony is that Donald Marshall was actually part of this Camelot project, not to be confused with the show, this is older, that they wanted a figurehead, like a King Arthur type, that would lead people into a false awakening. They eyed him from the beginning as a good candidate, and they even have what's called the Cold Ones, or the Pharisees, a faction of them that enact prophecies just to keep, in their words, religions viable for the people, for the masses. So they wanted to mislead people using Donald. So his initial disclosure was, allowed by them, but in the end, he didn't go along with their plans of of manicuring the information. He didn't want to present them in any other light than the truth. So one of the reasons why he's protected and why he's maybe the only one who can speak out about all of this in such depth is that even the cloners, a large majority of them, believe in certain prophecies, specifically a Nostradamus prophecy that foretells of a person with the initials D.M. who will save the world through truth and will sue the evildoers for the biggest lump sum of money ever to result from a trial. So whether it's true or not, it doesn't really matter, because the actual Illuminati believe it, so they cut him some slack for that, don't actually off him. Also, the fact that killing him at this point would kind of confirm what he's saying, so he's kind of protected that way. So one last bit about the coolest technology, if you want to call it that. The proton slamming, he said that the Hadron Collider also serves this function, that they can slam a certain set of time and save, like a save game, basically, in a game, and they can reload it. We know it in the SCP circles as anti-telephoning. Reload it whenever a certain occurrence doesn't go according to their plan. And they can do this as many as 6 to 7 times. But after that, they simply can't push it anymore because people start to remember. So apparently, what we call deja vus are nothing more than our consciousnesses being time traveled, for lack of a better term, back to when these elites want us to be. And one of the examples he gave is when he wrote out his initial letter coming out with all this information, he had to write it 6 times. But also, whenever a celebrity comes out with this, says that oh my God, I'm being cloned, and I'm being subjected to mind control and sexually abused and so on, they will never be able to get away with it, because the next day they will turn back the time this way, and they will be simply tortured to submission as much as they need to. They do this on the regular. So yeah, this is an interesting part, that even the mainline truthers that we know, a lot of them are attendees, and not all of them, a number of them want the truth out. But there is such a thing as a fake disclosure agenda that, unfortunately, some of the truthers have fallen prey for, and they believe that they believe the ET's lies, that they will benefit, but actually it's just insidious and a deception all the way. I don't know if I should name names, but because it's kind of tragic in a way.
It's happening. Like, there's AI programming from AI fractal viruses that have possessed people's bodies of Anunnaki beings from the past. And even Anunnaki were doing cloning 450,000 years ago, because they discovered the primitive primates that the Patal made, and then they cloned themselves, merged themselves with humans, hybridized humans, capped our telomeres so that we, start degrading at 70 and only can get to 120 in years. So this cloning goes back like thousands of years ago. Soul transferring of parasitic AI beings that were Anunnaki, like Anunnaki in history, real Anunnaki in history. They're soul fragments lurking around through AI systems transferred into people's soul consciousness, cohabitating, and the soul is fighting this being, where it's totally taken over by that fragment, that, fractal virus of that being takes over the human soul. And then you have the, fake liberation, fake ascension, whatever they're, preaching to us as the savior
Right.
complex. Like, that's happening now.
Totally. Yeah, unfortunately. So instead of exposing these disclosure people, which kind of are struggling themselves, I'm sure, I'll just name already, established celebrities. Since we were talking about this child abduction phenomenon, just to show how much power they wield, the Sound of Freedom movie that has been doing the rounds, Jim Caviezel and Mel Gibson, is not that they're evil, but they are very much involved with cloning, and they sometimes, according to Donald Marshall, participate in it. So they're all the time as attendees, forced to watch, of course, but they're not just passive observers. So that's just a glimpse. And lastly, about Donald Marshall's experiences, his encounters with aliens didn't just stop at the intraterrestrials. He also, despite not believing they were real to begin with, he later got introduced to a whole host of them. They apparently form a group called the Covenant, and they're made of different races. You have the Blue Avians, you have the Nephilim, you have the Draconians, and they and others, the majority reptilian. But what's interesting is they themselves wanted to be disclosed, and I mean to the T, in certain movies, for example. And I'm not saying that is definitely the case, but I mean, we can only go by his word, that the Nephilim are the mystics in Dark Crystal, down to the core that they do. But they wanted a very sanitized, a very sugar-coated presentation of them. They didn't want their extremely incisive and long teeth showed, for one. And also, they're the size of a horse, and then they can, in any fair fight, they would kill a human. But yeah, they're apparently these rodentia creatures, kind of a humanoid rodent, and they're big. And they have been warring with the Draconians for a very, very long time. And that cord that's disclosed is a way for them to fend off the Draconians, who are very sensitive to sound. And some of the other members of the Covenant are the Skeksis creatures, including down to the variety in the lengths of their beaks. That's how they look when they age. And maybe the most surprising of all these are, maybe they're imposters, maybe they're real, the Elohim are attendees, not just attendees, but the Blue Avians and the Elohim run things at the cloning center. Everyone fears them. They even say, when they're asked if there's any good guys in there, they say that those two, but then after they say that, they exhibit fear and trepidation. It might just be the real Elohim, or it might not. It's up to you to decide. For example, Rael, his contactee, who wrote books presenting the Elohim in a certain light, and he is a cloning attendee lifelong. And not just him, but many other truthers that are now semi-famous, according to Donald Marshall, have simply gotten all their information through these MK Ultra visualizations. For example, they were presented with this Pleiadian, beneficial Pleiadian scenario, which of course is not to say that all the Pleiadian accounts are false, not far from it, but they like to muddy the water, and they have been very successful in doing that. So in Donald Marshall's opinion, the only way for us to stop these three main terrifying trends the Illuminati do are, if this becomes worldwide knowledge, because we, like you said, we do outnumber the hosts by far, but it's not going to come through anyone in power. It has to come in a grassroots way. And this is becoming more and more obvious. This is also a recurring theme in Farsight's remote viewing. So just wanted to drop in the fact that Daryl was also told by Isaac that whiteheads are allowing the Illuminati to destroy our heroes and our statues, to tear down our statues. Also, for the same reason because this evil needs to be committed to our DNA so as to have a lasting effect. So we know not to repeat it ever again. Because there are whiteheads, as much as people want to be doom and gloom. If there weren't whiteheads as well, then we wouldn't have been having this conversation. So it's a constant back and forth. It's just that a lot of the time the whiteheads are not as physical, actually. They're more in earth. But yeah, I wanted to end with some stuff about the way that it's a lot of this is on us. So according to Alex Collier, who was told this by the Andromedans, as much as it seems like we are a victim of circumstance and that the universe has it in for us, the fact is we're the only race that kills itself, that allows its members to live in poverty and starvation and homelessness, and the only ones that actually enslaves its own people. That's what they say. And that pretty much every institution we create, we do it and we plan it in the space of fear. And that will always lead to like a lot of unraveling and disintegration. And this fear is not a creative force. We actually feed it ourselves. It drains us. And it clouds our consciousness, which we all have a very elevated form of it. And I wanted to mention that this fear also, the biggest, you could say, sin that it does is that it makes us withhold love. So the Andromedans could notice over the entire galaxy ruins of vast races, very, very powerful, that simply imploded. They drained themselves of their life force slowly over time, simply by withholding love. This oversight was their undoing. So also one of the biggest mechanisms, according to them, that we've been caught in this loop are institutionalized religions. And we shouldn't ever fear a loving God, quote unquote, that throws us into an abyss if we do the slightest mistake. So not just Alex Collier, but even Max Pierce and a lot of the others point to the fact that all of this wrongdoing is, Morena Jacobi also, is actually a product of our own, basically, minds. I mean, there is no such thing as outside. It's all our own reflection. We create the reality. It's well known. That's actually the lesson of the reincarnation cycle, that we create our own reality through our thoughts. So the way we should look at it, at what's going on right now, is that it's our own lower nature that is fighting for our very souls. Because even according to the Chinamar books, you shouldn't even look at evil as something real. It's tantamount to saying that God makes mistakes, but God is, the source creator, is perfectly efficient, and he doesn't look at it. It's only us that interpret even hatred and torture and turmoil and all these things as evil, but it's just our lack of understanding. Maybe once we, ascend or whatever, once we get to the next stage of evolution, we will be able to put this all in perspective, hopefully. So now we're getting to the remedies, the solutions that I hinted at. And I will also ask you about one that is very significant. So one way is, according to the Italian doctor that I mentioned, to entrap these regressives is by hypnotherapy, either done by yourself or another person. He calls it self-induced method for blocking abductions definitively. But it's not to say that there's only this way. So the upshot of it is that you need to connect yourself with your higher self, and to be able to bypass the archetypal language that these nefarious ETs are using to, control us, and that our soul's will can and does eliminate them and their interference and even their implants. So yeah, I wanted to ask, because at one point you wrote in one of your books that you have even been able to cancel the contracts that you have been a victim of in your SSP experiences. Can you go over that?
Yeah, sure. I realized it was being used in the programs, And as much as the technology and the experiences are interesting, it's not worth my time and my soul energy to continue the cycle of being in the programs. So I decided, and I used hypnosis to see what the memories were and sort out what the ET contact stuff was, what the SSB stuff was, ET past life stuff. There were so many different things as part of this, various experiences. So I singled out the SSB stuff. Yeah, I'm being taken. Yeah, I'm being abducted. And I'm like, this is no longer interesting to me. I don't want to participate in this. I no longer want to be connected to Planetary Corp. I no longer want to go on basis. I no longer want to be picked up. I cut all cords that bind. I close any portals. I disengage from the experiences of being abducted. I do not give consent. I revoke all contracts. I am not to be taken. I will not be taken by these parties, blah, 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 blah. Put all the names, sever the contracts, and stop looking up at the sky for the SSB crafts to come and show themselves. Like, I disengaged myself from that phenomenon, because the more you look for it, the more you seek it and search it, the more it comes to you, and you're re-engaged in these experiences. So you have to disengage completely. So I did that, and then I'm like, well, the next step is to get the implants out, the Neuralink implants, because a lot of SSP assets, and they are assets on Mars, the moon, they have these implants. They have microchips or Neuralink implants that telepathically they can communicate with their SSP handlers, bosses, or other extraterrestrials who send information or control them or whatever, just telepathic communication goes through these implants, and you control holographic technology and other things. The implants malfunctioned. I refused for the Planetary Corp to energetically go back, to physically go back on Mars to have these implants energetically recalibrated to function properly. I said no thank you, and I excised them through psychic surgery. Literally found the roadmap of how these implants function, how to energetically and physically remove them through psychic surgery, and totally get them out of my brain so that I wouldn't have my brain exploding or being inflamed. Because it was literally remove the implants or eventually neurological damage and brain death eventually, because the implants had nanofiber connections. They had nanofiber gold in the implants. I had 4 implants. They had energy cores. So there's a lot of complicated energetic circuitry, which a group of Nordics working with Planetary Corp had created and inserted through many people's brains, through the bloodstream going to the brain, everything opening up, connecting to the neurons, the axons, basically activating these Neuralink implants. So I said, okay, I'm going to excise this. I'm not going to give them any more access through these implants to my brain. Cut off the video, cut off the audio, cut off everything, get it off, get it out of my brain. Remove the nanite tech, did that through psychic surgery. And I've been free of any type of implants, free of any type of suggestion. Sometimes I have telepathic communication with Arcturians and stuff, but I'm in realization of who I am, and I don't want mind control. I don't want to be taken into the programs. I don't want this experience, that experience. If I want to experience something, I will experience it for myself on my own, to the degree that I want, not somebody telling me what to do, or you have to do this, you have to go there, and you have to do that. That's what the programs do. That's what some negative extraterrestrials do with control, telepathic mind control through Neuralink implants or microchips. So implants are a way to control humans to do what they want us to do, not what we want, but taking away the sovereignty and free will choice. You have to understand, free will choice allows us to choose, not for them to choose for us, but we choose what we want. Some people are trapped in these cycles of control patterns in these programs because they don't know how to get out and sever the contracts.
Totally well said. And you're your own savior, basically. That's the lesson, I guess. And I'm glad you could share that, because a lot of people are stuck in self-victimization, and there's always a way out, and you have to put up a fight. So just to conclude with the other fixes, so to speak, according to Jesse Zabodar, you have to remove permissions for these access doorways into your mind. And you do this by rebuking the spirits, the not well-aligned spirits. Then, according to another victim of REM abduction, you have to use hemisync, like binaural beats, which I think you have some videos of that, and to use that, not so much the meditation, but maybe that too, but especially the beats themselves, that will take care of it for yourself, because you're very subject to manipulation when in your sleep, and just to sleep with that noise, and you should be more protected. Oh, and also you should write down your dreams after you wake up to make this less of an abstract. And also, if you can't write down, you should just record, and that's actually preferable because it's faster. So this hemisync is apparently even more efficient in most cases than remote viewing and meditation. Not that those are bad, but those, to the untrained person, can actually attract these negative entities as well. So Donald Marshall, is a piece of news that came up recently, is that he, at long last, after 35 or 40 years of being taken, has found a way to block these REM transfers, according to him, which is via an EMF protective canopy, which contains a mixture of nickel, silver, and I think copper. And there's even clothing with those materials. Those help too, especially if they go around your head, like a helmet or hoodie or something. He walks around in those all the time. He says it's the best time of his life, since he's in the canopy 24/7. And the thing about the canopy is it's quite pricey, but the clothing is much more affordable. It's only like $100 for the whole outfit. And the last one that I had to mention, especially when it comes to non-physical abductions, which are very plentiful, there is this thing called the Velostat helmet, which experiencers swear by. So in 24 years of it, so it has the whole schematics of how to build them yourself. I'm not even sure they do sell them, but they have the step-by-step how to make them for free. They involve a certain material that you can buy. In all, it only costs $45 of raw material. And in 24 years, there has only been one unsuccessful case that has not been able to fend off these non-physical abductions. It sounds too good to be true, but I'm taking them for their word. And the site for this to go to is stopabductions.com. So yeah, that was pretty much the conclusion there.
Well, I have another fix. Energetically, I say, I don't want to dream. I don't want anybody to control me through dreams. Stop dreaming. So I don't dream. That does not make me a clone. I know you said that if people stop dreaming, they might be clones. It's something in energetic design I created myself not to dream, because through the dreamscape, they can do soul transference too and take you out of body and put you into a clone, a cyborg body, an avatar. So if you don't open up the doors with a key through your dreams, they can't manipulate your dream state. So I don't dream at night. If any contact happens, communication happens, it's when I'm cognizantly aware during the day or the evening. But when I go to sleep, I close all doors to any manipulation through dream state. So I've sort of created a revocation. Can't take me through dreamscape. You can't manipulate me through dreamscape.
I actually completely agree. It was Marshall, I think, that said that celebrities don't dream anymore. And of course, it doesn't go for all of them, but they also, a lot of time, when you're in the cloning center, give you drugs to simulate the feeling of dreaming. So you can't even trust if it's a dream or not. But I too subscribe to the idea that not dreaming is actually probably a good sign.
Yeah, I mean, it also takes off the stress, because when you dream, you subliminally reenact your stressors, what happens to you during the day. It reoccurs in your dream state to work it out. So it's like, take off the stress, take off the manipulation through dream state. You just have calm. you just have your consciousness sleeping without interruption or interference. That's sort of energetic protection shield I created for my own, like by myself, for myself. And it's worked for me to keep anything out of the dream state, anything out that is not of the highest good. It doesn't come in, and it protects me. So anything, if something does happen during the day or at night, when I'm not asleep, something comes at me, I know what it is. But in dream state, it's not acceptable. That's when you're sleeping, you're at your most vulnerable because you're in your subconsciousness state. So that's when interferences happen the most, through their dream state. And the SSP, yeah, the SSP programs can interfere with you in the dream state.
Of course. Which is not to say that you shouldn't access the subtler planes, but do it consciously, not at the whim of others.
Mhm.
But
Exactly.
I'm glad you humored me. I pretty much threw the kitchen sink, all the heaviest stuff that I found on the internet, and you just confirmed so much. So yeah, I'm grateful. And it's like the Andromedans said, you have to walk the middle path. This is the only way that you're gonna learn anything. If you go too much love and light, that's BS, because the fact is you need to defend yourself, and the defense oftentimes includes offense as well.
Mhm.
You can't be a sitting duck, so you just have to walk the middle path there.
Yeah, and we have also something Farsight did that was interesting, that talks geoengineering, talks portals. One of the Disclosure Wars, that is the recent remote viewing. And I wanted to share that because it has elements of what we discussed, sort of go over the points that I discovered and I had shared with you. So I kind of want to share that, and so we can go over that together. Okay. So on the right hand side, it looks like some kind of left hand side, there's a woman, there's mountains, there's kind of like underground facilities, something burning, portals. On the right hand side, also portals, souls coming in and out. So I found that there's a subject and some kind of a box and a leadership thing going on. So these depictions reminded, and credit goes to Farsight, Courtney Brown and his remote viewing team. I wanted to sort of go over this thing. So on the left-hand side, you have your portals, you have your wormholes, you have your clouds. And this reminded me of abductions. It reminded me of interferences. So can I go over this stuff?
By all means.
Yeah, so in this remote viewing, I found depictions seems to be showing human trafficking of people with psionic abilities and for other purposes of sex slavery, work slavery, organ harvesting, etc. The Sound of Freedom movie, what that depicts and describes, this is in this remote viewing. Abductions of people or beings by negative extraterrestrials, human suffering. There's also mountain facilities and the wormhole or portal in the sky, because you can be abducted through portals or wormholes. Mountains with secret bases in them and facilities that create fires. Radu Sinamar in his series talks about secret bases in the Basagi Mountains in Romania, and you're in Romania, and we've talked about the book series. And there's portals, there's energy, there's frequency. So these facilities are in mountains, under mountains, which I think has connections. And there's D.U.M.b.s bases, there's alien UFO bases, like what's happening under Alaska. And some of these facilities have technology that can create fires, earthquakes, tsunamis, directed beam energy weapons, and weather modification. And there's that geoengineering facilities with ionization and atmospheric generators that act like pressure cooker technologies to heat up the planet, and weather modification, devices that create large storms like hurricanes, tornadoes, fires, earthquakes, mudslides, creates global warming on the planet. Trees are dying, there's fires in various places. Like what you talked about, reduce the human populations and create more pollution, make planet less habitable for humans, like the control of human depopulation. that is happening, what we discussed, as well as also like geoengineering, warming up the ionosphere and the atmosphere, pressure cooking, just heating things up all over the planet, cloning people and kidnapping beings through portals and being taken into secret underground facilities for medical experimentation, biological manipulation, people being transported off planet through wormholes or portals for evil extraterrestrial agendas, and using humans as currency and resources for trade, what the Draco reptilians have done and what other regressives have done, what Alex Collier spoke about. I think that's being shown in this remote viewing, like portals, portaled out, taken without permission, cloning centers on the surface and in underground facilities. Military and three-letter agencies know about these activities and abductions of humans by negative extraterrestrials, regressive ETs, made deals with world governments. So the regressive ETs had made the deals with world governments to abduct humans in exchange for anti-gravity technology and medical regenerative technologies, which we also spoke about. So this is what I found as the predominant themes in this remote viewing. What is your interpretation of this?
Yeah, for the longest time, I've been itching for Fireside to dip their toes into this topic. If I was going to perform remote viewing, it would be definitely on cloning centers and this geoengineering and, you know, hidden agenda, depopulation, all this stuff. And they're finally doing it, and it's great. It's all the stuff that we've been talking about, but we have to tighten the variables so we leave no room for any doubt, because I want this type of remote viewing to have as actionable as possible outcome. So I'm glad they're starting out, and I hope they will continue. I want it to be clear cut, to be very conclusive. Of course, it's impossible to do it one, but yeah, that would be my input. And
yeah, I think that Farsight title, The Disclosure Wars, speaks for itself, like what that remote viewing is describing. They said it's about the political elites and the military war stuff and how that connects to the ETs, but I think they found a lot more in that remote viewing. So if somebody watches that in its full entirety, you're going to find a lot of nuggets and tidbits of heavy duty disclosure. And I think Farsight is coming out with a new remote viewing for the secret space programs, US secret space programs. So that's something to watch out for as well, right?
that they are, yes, I'm a subscriber, and it couldn't be better suited. I mean, all this stuff that you've been talking about for years, to get this type of confirmation is just a godsend. I mean, yeah, it's exciting that it's all coming out, and people might say it's all dark, but I don't look at it that way. It's just shedding light on the darkness, because there's a huge difference between dark and evil. Evil is doing it on purpose, and dark is just being ignorant of it.
Yeah, and it would be interesting if anybody with remote viewing skills would remote planetary corporations, Mars bases, lunar space operations on the moon, and how all of that ties in with these underground D.U.M.s bases, reverse engineering programs of UFO crafts, Area 51. Like, how does it all tie in? Because it's interconnected. There's no coincidence.
Well, the cup runs over with all the rich subjects they could delve into there, the year's worth of archives. So it's not that, it's just a shortage of remote viewers. And perhaps if they can also make it organized effort, so collective, that would lend even more credibility. So why should Farsight be the only ones? They themselves suggest that others should join them in this little mission.
Indeed. So thank you so much. I think we covered a lot of disclosure and what is happening in this reality, and that we need to be free and not controlled by the enslavement systems.
You said it. Yeah, thanks very much for having me, and looking forward to the next one.
Me too. Bye.